I realize I haven't gotten very personal so far. It's been mostly philosophy, and I've got a lot more of that, but I thought maybe it's time to get a little personal. And I thought I would do the top 10 worst things my mother ever did to me episode that I kind of half joked about some episodes ago. So I was like, let me sit down and think about this. And literally within about 30 seconds, they were all on the page. I didn't have to think much at all about it. I actually have more. So I'm going to have to figure out which ones are in the top 10 and which ones are just honorable mentions. But I don't think I can do this episode without talking about something else first. To be clear, the run of the mill, everyday abuse stuff is mostly not in the top 10 list. Not to say it isn't awful, but those things are more specific list items and mostly about emotional and psychological abuse. What I am going to talk about now is a very unpopular opinion. Good thing I don't give a shit if anyone watches this channel. Anyway, unpopular opinion. Anyone who hits their child should die alone. With me so far? Cool. This is where I'm going to lose a bunch of people. I'm talking about spanking too. I hate the word spanking, and I am going to say it one more time, and then I'm going to try to not use that word again. Spanking is a fucking cute word for a horrible act of abuse, meant to make it seem more innocuous. Maybe we should use that word for when couples want to get mildly kinky in bed, and I'll get back to that later. But let's just call it what it is when it's done to a non-consenting child. And let me be clear, no child can consent to this, although they are often asked to. It is abuse, assault. Even if it is done in a way that isn't that painful, oh, it's just a swat, it is humiliating. It teaches children that it is okay for people who love them to hurt them, and that violence is an answer. This is why so many of us end up having abusive relationships that we don't realize are abuse at the time. It also teaches children to fear authority, which is why I think this act is still legal in every state in America. It makes for better citizens. My mother didn't just spank me, for the record, but even if that is all she did, I think that was enough for her to die alone. This woman I used to game with was talking in Discord about how her child had to get spanked at his Catholic school that day. I can't believe this is still a fucking thing. Like, a parent doing it is bad enough, but giving permission and handing your child off to the church for discipline, that something like this still exists. It's the kind of thing that gives me no hope for the world, makes me not want to live in it anymore. Anyway, I said something about it, and she said it makes him better. It doesn't make him better. It makes him better for you for a little while. She said he got into a fight, and I told her that I got into fights because I got hit. I'm sure of it, because I wanted to lash out at someone that I was on even ground with, where it was a fair fight, unlike when I was punished by my mother. I mean, she would often make me come to her and submit for punishment that makes you feel so small and helpless and submissive and just like a little piece of shit. But I think that's the point, even more than causing pain. I think it is actually everything that is wrong with the world. It's how we're conditioned to submit. It's why we smile at the police officer that has pulled us over while we are helpless and he is literally in charge of our bodies' current location in space, at the least, under the threat of violence. And then when they let us leave, we say, thank you. What the fuck? What if you did this to a non-consenting adult? What if you did it to a partner or an employee or someone who cut in front of you at the grocery store? It would be assault. How is it we are not protecting our most vulnerable population from assault? Because we need to teach children to respect authority so they grow up and submit themselves to the rules of an increasingly tyrannical government. I'm an anarchist, and I think if there has to be a government, the government's job is to enforce universal, natural law. Only things that no one wants to happen to them. Everything else is just money-making legislation. If you want to know more about this, I recommend you read Bastiat's The Law. It is very short and it pretty much says it all. If it's the government's job to protect citizens from assault, why are children excluded? So obviously, she used the typical argument that she was hit and she turned out just fine. I asked her, have you never been in an abusive relationship? And I know she has. That was the end of the conversation, partly because she had no answer and partly because Ahmad broke it up. Yeah, let's just all agree to disagree on child abuse. I never raided with her again or spoke to her at all. I have no idea if that conversation changed her in any way. I hope so for the sake of her kid, who, by the way, if you aren't already angry enough, is also special needs. I've heard the force spanking argument a lot that kids under a certain age don't understand reason. So by that logic, a special needs kid might understand reason even less. But I had to at least try. And I had to try to be gentle about it, no matter how angry I was, because I really wanted to try to reach her. This conversation somehow, by the way, got started in the off-topic hobbies we do room in my guild. What the fuck? It isn't okay to just let people spew this kind of nonsense and not speak up just because it's a divisive, uncomfortable topic. Speak up. If more people spoke up, maybe there would be a little less child abuse. Let's fucking make child abuse taboo, okay? Who's with me? We also need to let children know it's wrong. I obviously don't believe that the law and morality is the same thing. See Bastiat's law. But that's what most people believe, and that's certainly what children are taught in government schools. So how can we make children realize this is wrong when it isn't even illegal anywhere in America? Most children don't know anything different because people don't talk about it. They think it is normal. I thought it was normal. I was told it was necessary. I was told she did it because she loves me. How fucked up is that? It's easy to abuse a victim that doesn't know they are being abused. And she did not love me. She was a sociopath. She did not have a conscience. She proved this time and time again. Back to it being a sex thing. And this is where I'm going to lose most people. And for that reason, I almost don't want to say it, but it has to be said. Spanking is sexual abuse. Fuck, I said that word again. But like I said, it makes sense to call it something that cute sounding in the context of sex between two consenting adults. Your sex organs are connected, and they are going to be stimulated when your ass is hit. This is one of the reasons it is arousing for adults. For most children, this is the first time they feel any stimulation in this area, but instead of being pleasurable, it is painful and confusing. I think this is why it is typical to stop hitting kids post-puberty, but kids can feel all that stuff too. If you smack someone on the ass without consent, you get arrested for sexual assault. Why is it okay when you do it to a child? I remember feeling this steady throbbing in my sex organs like a heartbeat, counting. The time that it took to pass, probably depending on the severity of the beating, just waiting for it to go away so I could think about something else, anything else. It's easier to keep doing something wrong and make excuses for it than to admit that you were wrong and start doing better. It's easier to admit that you were guilty of child abuse than admit you were guilty of child sexual abuse. It might be just as hard to admit that these things were done to you because you can't stomach the fact that you too were abused. You may have been excusing them just to reassure yourself that you are okay, that your upbringing was okay, that your parents did a fine job of raising you. Newsflash, you are not okay. You are an asshole that hits children, just like your parents. It is a constant cycle of the abused becoming the abuser. But maybe this next generation will get it. Stop now, and maybe your child won't be an asshole like you. I think most grandparents would never hit their grandkids. So maybe think of it like that. Don't turn your child into someone who is going to hit your grandkids. An argument I often hear is, How else would you possibly handle X? Ask that of any other question in the adult world. How would you handle this without violence? Violence is only acceptable in self defense. Why is there an exception for children? And what about tantrums? How can you stop a tantrum without violence? Small children are experiencing all of these new things. It must be like tripping on acid, where everything is new and interesting and possibly very scary. They need to be given the freedom to explore emotions without fear of punishment, physical or not. They need to be told that their feelings are valid and help learning how to work through them and express them appropriately. Most adults don't even know how to do that. No one should be beaten or punished in any way for having feelings that you don't know how to articulate. I have friends that don't even believe in timeouts, which I love. They have chill outs. Let's sit here and chill out and talk about our feelings if you want to. And don't forget that children are humans that have different ways of handling things. Some kids throwing a tantrum need some space, just leave them alone. Some need a hug, some need to talk it out if they're there yet. Try to get to know your kid instead of just deciding that everything you think is wrong with your kid should be corrected with violence. Or we can just angrily and violently repress these emotions in children so they turn into adults that never learn how to cope. And it doesn't do anything positive. It doesn't teach children anything good, even how to behave in a way that adults find acceptable. When the threat of punishment is always hanging over your head, you act in a way that you think will prevent punishment, not in a way where you do what is right. I tried to explain this to an employer once when I was drinking with him after resigning. That restaurant had the highest turnover of any place I'd ever seen. One of my ex-friends, who I thought a lot of at that time, who I thought was a peaceful parent and a genuinely good person, said that having a child is like being in a relationship with someone annoying that you can't get out of. That was his excuse for hitting his kids. I said, for the child, it's like being in an abusive relationship that you can't get out of, even if you have the strength and desire to. He said he regrets hitting his children, and he spoke to them about it, and he said he was sorry and he was wrong. But one of them told me that that was a lie and that he did worse. Another ex-friend who at least I didn't think as much of. We were hanging out in a group at a party, and she was joking about hitting her kids when mommy is in a mood. Let me be clear, whether it is emotional or intentional, both are bad. But this type of behavior specifically teaches kids that it is okay to express frustrations with violence and on someone who can't fight back. I was so shocked to hear that someone I know hits their kids. I was like, Jesus, I thought my friends were more enlightened than that. A lot of people think I don't have the right to say any of this because I am not a parent and just don't understand what it is like. But I was a child. And if you are complaining that parenthood is difficult and that's why you spank your child, well, fuck you. People have children, I think, for mostly the wrong reasons. Another unpopular opinion. I got hit a lot, and I wasn't a bad child. But even if you think you were bad, you still didn't deserve to get hit. Almost everything I remember about childhood is getting punished. Being wrong, being a failure, being just an ugly, stupid piece of shit. And if you're going to say that I have these issues because I wasn't spanked with love, fuck you, that's not a thing. It was really hard getting my thoughts organized on this subject because I have so much to say and it's wrapped up in so many emotions. The main thing about trying to correct this in people is that they can't accept that they are wrong and that wrong was done to them. It is such a difficult challenge to their identity. This is the reason it doesn't change, or it's changing so slowly. Sometimes I wish I could just hit them and they would fucking learn, right? That's how you teach people things that they're too stupid to understand, right? No. Be the better person. Acknowledge the bad things, say you are sorry, and start doing better. It will also teach kids it is okay to admit their mistakes. It will teach them to trust you. It could be a beautiful thing. And speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. You can change the world. Maybe some kids can work through this past abuse, but most can't. Honestly, I wouldn't take the chance if I were a parent. Maybe this generation will be more enlightened. Maybe you'll die alone.